So I've been thinking that probably part of the reason we
It's a very good.
we don't have a full understanding of our relationship is maybe we don't understand our God, who our God is. So if you happen to print off the handout that I sent out, you can use that. If you didn't, you can use a blank sheet of paper, or if you have a pristine, pure memory like Ron has, then you can go. Doesn't he have a perfect memory, Glenda?
No comment.
No comment? Oh, okay. No comment.
Okay.
I wish.
Wish. Well, then Bobby's got perfect recall, right, Lyle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
Uh-oh. Well, I noticed that I want to acknowledge the fact that we have someone that I don't recognize with us tonight. Sir Samsung SM J327A. You want to introduce
How are you
yourself?
doing?
You want to introduce yourself to us?
He doesn't know who he is.
Guess
He
not.
might not have the audio on.
You might not. Well, it looks like he does. Well, anyway, we'll go ahead, and if he cares to introduce himself later, we'll be happy to meet him. But what's your God like? In the
Talking to me,
worksheet.
Dale? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. What? Anybody? In the worksheet, I'd like you to take a minute or two and just consider, write down if you can, but write down up to 5 characteristics that describe your God. When you think of your God, what is your God like? And let's make a list of what our God is like.
Well, you know, Dale, I think some of our problem in our relationship with God
Okay.
is our relationship with our earthly father.
Okay.
Because some of us did not have good, loving, caring fathers. Some of us had very brutal fathers. And so we see God a lot of times through the eyes of what we see our earthly father as. And that causes a lot of difficulty because, quite frankly, if God was anything like my earthly father, I didn't want to have anything to do with him.
So if he was your model for God, what would be at one time in your life words you would have used to describe your God?
Abusive.
Abusive.
And so, you know, we have to filter sometimes, because if those who had very loving, involved fathers who were good fathers, then you're more likely to transfer those feelings onto God. Then say, well, he must be like my daddy because my daddy loves me and he's good to me and he does things with me and he protects me and he watches out for me and he brings food and clothes for me. And so surely God must be a lot like that.
Yeah.
But those who didn't have that kind of father think, oh, well, maybe God's going to pounce on me the minute I do something wrong, or he's not going to make sure that I'm taken care of or that I have what I need. So we see them through then a different set of glasses. So sometimes we have to have an aha moment in which we really just set that aside, which I mean, I had to, and just say, who is God? I have to just set that aside and study for myself who God is and what he can be to me.
So you had at some point to redefine your God.
Yeah.
You had to make him a nicer person. You know, I was fortunate to have, I can say 2 things about my dad. I never worried about anything when he was around. And when he died, I realized that I had lost a person that was prouder of me than anybody else in the world. In fact, he was embarrassingly proud of me. And I'd like to think that when we are using our talents and following God's will for us, that God is proud of what we do too. There's got to be some parent pride there. Buzz, how would your kids describe you as a father? I have a pretty good idea, so don't put us off here.
I've got a shirt that says best papa in the world.
Best papa, well, that's probably from the granddaughter.
Yeah. Well, the kids would probably say that too. But I've got 5 words that I would use for describing God or
Okay.
Jesus. Forgiving, comforting, loving, protecting, and savior.
Those are good words: forgiving, loving, comforting, protecting, and savior. And that's probably how I would have described my relationship with my father. It wasn't a perfect relationship. In fact, we didn't really communicate until I moved 1,000 miles away and we built a relationship over the telephone. That's when we started to talk and be the best. But it's a different. What about you, Dan?
Well, my father became a better man in his older years,
Yeah.
and he was absent a lot when he was younger. He had, I guess you'd call it narcolepsy. You put him in a chair, he'd fall asleep. So
Yeah.
he did that. But when I was young, I thought God was exacting. He was somewhat harsh. It was impossible. And as I've gotten older, I understand that he is loving, he's fair, he's giving, comforting, loyal, and he's my legal representative.
Okay. Maybe you ought to explain that last one. What do you mean by your legal representative?
Well, I mean, there's no way I could save myself. Only he can do it, and he's willing to do that.
All right.
He's willing to stand in my stead, take the punishment, and represent me and say, look, I'm taking care of this.
I think
I
that's,
take care of this. He's this way, but I'm this way. I take care of this.
you know, the thing that impressed me most, the memory that I most had from my dad was the strength of his hands. They were big, work hardened, calloused, veined hands, and they meant security to me. And that's what God is. God is security. And I remember at my dad's funeral, I asked somebody to sing Daddy's Hands, if you're familiar with that. And unfortunately, he liked my dad so much he couldn't sing the song. So somebody ended up reading it. Someone who couldn't sing ended up reading it, but I'd really wanted to hear that song because that was symbolic to me. So any other observations about who your God is and what your God is like? We've had some good input here. And how do you resonate with that, what you've heard, Jason, these 2 or 3 descriptions of God?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, my concept of God and who he is has been really mistaken pretty much my entire life.
Yeah.
I've gone through life always knowing that there is a God, okay, and there's a one and only, and I've always been of the opinion that, you know, I didn't necessarily had to be conventional and go to church and practice the way others practice religion. I always felt that I could just talk to God in my own way and have a relationship with him in my own way, on my own terms, and that would be fine. Now I'm sort of kind of going back on that now because I realized that I need to have a more concrete foundation with my relationship with God. I still do believe that I don't need to necessarily go to church every day and do this like others do. As far as my relationship and who I think he is, well, right now I'm learning to, like, I talk to God pretty much just like I would talk to you, Gail, in my everyday life nowadays. That's pretty much how I do and how I communicate with him. I pray in the evening. As far as the 5 words, I'd have to say loving, patient, forgiving. He's my confidant and my best friend.
You know, you mentioned confident. That's what a lot of people don't realize, but you can confide everything to God. I think you can even be angry with him. I think he can take it. If that's how you're feeling and you're having an honest relationship, you have to be angry. So I don't know. I know a bit about Dan's relationship as the God figure in his family and how much he worries about his children and what he's been willing to do. I know a bit about Buzz's relationship with his kids. I know his son, 49 years old, calls you how many times a day would you say, just to shoot the breeze?
Oh, at least once.
At least once a day. Yeah. And just something occurs to him that he thinks his dad might like to know, and he calls him, and they have a short conversation, and then he goes on. But I think Jolie calls you quite a bit too
Yeah.
during the day.
Of course, she lives close, so she's here a lot.
Yeah. So, Paul, thank you for joining us.
Apologize, my computer just wouldn't log in.
Well, mine wouldn't either at first. I had to disconnect the screen and get it fired up. This is, for those of you who don't know, this is my good friend Paul Rossberry. He's
If
he's not normal in any stretch of the word.
Who is?
you're right where you belong.
Oh, he's further off from normal than anybody else, I'll tell you that. But he's been an important mentor and occasional business partner for both Sam and me in our lives, and he's helping me with my filming. We were just talking about describing our God, Paul, and we got some pretty good descriptors, and we also have discovered the fact that a lot of us, for our image of God, it's very much colored by our relationship with our own parent, our own father. And we've had at least one testimony that her image of God was not a positive one. Abusive, I think, was the term, because her father was that way. And yet she's been able to redefine her definition of God, and now married to a very kind man who, well, Bobby's tough. He wouldn't dare to be abusive, I don't think, but
Depends on whether she's bigger than him.
oh, let me tell you, these are both tall people. They look short, but you stand beside them, they're not short people. Anyway, and so Dan, we talked a bit about his relationship. I don't know, Ron and Glenda, do you have any thoughts to share with us?
Yep. I look at my Savior as omnipresent,
Okay.
and that became more meaningful to me during the year of breast cancer that I had to have and treatment. And Hebrews 13:5, that I will never leave you or forsake you, became my mantra, my verse. And it still is, because I knew he'd never leave me,
Yeah.
regardless of what I was going through.
And he never does,
No.
and he's there even when we don't feel like he's there. That's the interesting thing about God. Anyway, we talked a bit about personal relationship with the God you described, but Bobby, if I can put you on the spot, and I know I can because you always come through, but when you saw God as abusive and hard and harsh, how would you describe your relationship with God?
Well, like I said, I really didn't want to have anything to do with him because I already had
Yeah.
a father that was that way. So what motive would I have of wanting to love another person that was just like the father I had?
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I guess I went through a real struggle to get that image out of my head. And as I studied more and found out that God was really just so loving, and why would he send his son down here if he didn't, to die for me, if he didn't love me?
Yeah.
And so slowly I was able to turn that image around and finally think, well, maybe he was worth getting to know, and maybe he wasn't like my father. I mean, although my father was a good provider, we were dirt poor, but he went to work every day to provide for his family. But I just thought there has to be something better. It can't be the same. It has to be. God has to be something better, because otherwise, why would he send his son down here to die for miserable human beings
Yeah.
if he didn't just love us so much that he was willing to do that? And if somebody was willing to do that, maybe he was worth getting to know.
Maybe he was a little better than what you.
Yeah. And then so slowly turned that around. And the more I got to know him, the more I found out that, and not only was he worth knowing, but he was worth telling others about.
Yeah. Did you ever, were you ever able to reconcile your relationship with your father?
Yeah, we were. I was the youngest of 9 kids, and I guess I was a bit spoiled, mostly by my siblings. But my dad and mom, neither one were very demonstrative as far as showing love or affection. But as I got older, that became a little bit more. And then my father was sick, and so I took care of him for quite a while. And so that made us a little closer. And I think that put us on a different level, because once I was a nurse and I could take care of him and try to help him through, because he had cancer. And so that put us on a little different level. And I think we worked through a lot of things. And I think, unfortunately, it came a little late, but came to realize that my father did love his children. He just didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Didn't have that relationship.
Yeah, his mother was very abusive and hard and dictator, so that's all he knew. He never had a father that was in his life. And so he just had no clue with how to relate to his children. And so once you kind of understand that, then you give them some slack.